I just feel pretty good. I feel pretty normal. I feel pretty calm. I said to my wife, I feel zen. Which, if you know me at all, is not really my thing. I'm not a zen kind of guy. Hey there, Coach Devin here. All right, I want to talk about something that's a little different than physical fitness. We're going to talk a little bit about mental health right now. And while you probably are saying, Devin, what will you know about mental health? That is true. I don't know a ton about mental health. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. But I do want to tell a little bit about my own story on the mental health side of things because I think it is cogent and important, and I think it's something that people should know. So I have been a guy that I've been fortunate enough to be pretty positive my whole life. That has sort of been my go-to. I always feel pretty good. I had a psychiatrist one time that was a client, and he said to me, when you have a problem at night and you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, how do you feel? And I said, well, when I feel good, and I have like 2 or 3 ways to fix that problem. And he said, that's just good wiring. You're just lucky. Anyway. Flash forward a bit. That was several years ago. Flash forward a bit, and as I've talked a little bit about on here before, I had a staph infection in 2020. Would have been April of 2020, I think, March or April of 2020. Got very sick, almost died. Spent a lot of time in the hospital. A lot of fun stuff. Well, actually, not fun at all. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, I didn't feel right from that physically for quite a while, but I also didn't really right mentally for quite a bit either. And for about 2 years, give or take, my wife's been like, you're not the same. You're a little different. And I had noticed that I am not, well, I wouldn't say I was depressed. Never really felt down. Wasn't, suicidal, nothing like that. But I felt negative. And that is the best way to put it. I felt negative. I didn't feel like right. I didn't feel like myself. And I'm going to give you an example of it. I felt, my wife and I saw this couple walking on the beach, the older couple, they're in their like 70s, right? And they're walking on the beach and they're holding hands. And my wife's like, oh, isn't that cute? Look at that. That's great. It's a couple, they're holding hands on the beach. And, isn't that nice to see, people can be like that later in life. And ordinarily, my first go-to would be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, what a cool thing. That's what I want to aspire to. And instead, I was like, oh, there's probably second marriage. That's where my head went. And I'm like, and when it happened, I thought, that's not right. There's something's off here. And I started to really pay attention to it and think about it a lot. And I was like, I don't feel the same level of positivity that I had before. I've always been a pretty intense guy. But I found my intense level was much more in a negative bend. It was a much more negative bend. I felt more negative, which is not usually my normal thing. I would describe myself ordinarily to be relentlessly positive, most of the time positive. And it felt wrong. It felt off. So I talked to my doctor. I made a doctor's appointment, talked to my doctor, and I'm like, look, I don't feel right. And I haven't felt right for like a little over 2 years. I don't feel like who I am. I don't feel like my best version of myself at all. I just feel... It feels wrong. It feels like something's wrong. And I'm not sitting around thinking about suicide. I don't feel down. I'm not sitting around crying, but I'm overly negative. And I'm overly sensitive to things. I'm just, I don't feel normal, which my wife has been saying for a while. And I have been, I guess, skirting around the issue a little bit myself because, anyway. My doctor says, okay, ordinarily what I would do in this case, I would tell you to exercise and eat better and not drink alcohol and not smoke and, sleep well. And she's like, you're doing all that stuff. Like, I work out all the time. And I always try to get enough sleep. I don't always get enough sleep, but I try to. I eat well. I don't drink at all. I don't smoke. I try to take care of my body. So she's like, you're kind of doing everything I would normally want you to do. I think that in this situation, a lot of people who have gone through something a situation where you almost die. And, I know it sounds kind of dramatic to say that a situation you almost died. But that actually was what happened. When I went to the hospital the last time, the doctor said, if you go home, you'll be dead in 36 hours. We don't bring you into the hospital and keep you here right now and put you on IV. And I had a blood infection. It was bad. And she said a lot of people find that at the end of that, they don't feel right. and I would get them to exercise and eat well and all those things. But you're doing those things, and it's been a couple of years, and it's still not quite right. I think you should take medication. Now, I am not, if you know me, I'm not a medication guy. I don't like medication very much. I would prefer not to take medication. I'm always concerned about side effects on medication and, you know, whatever. That's not my go-to. I don't like it. And to be clear, when I was at work, I could be positive at work. I could still be positive at home sometimes too, but I was finding it was, lack of a better term, it felt like work to be positive, if that makes any sense. It was just it's hard to explain, but I felt like it was work. I had to work to be positive instead of just being positive. So she said, I think you should take something. And I'm like, I don't like the idea of doing it, but whatever you think is best, you know, you're the doctor. There's nothing I hate worse than a client that says, you don't know what you're talking about, because they don't usually know what they're talking about. So I've always been a fan of doing what people, let an expert do what they do, right? That's what I try to do. Let an expert do what they do. So I decided that that's what I would do. She put me on an antidepressant. I am on Prozac. So if I started Prozac, it'd be a little over 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to give a little bit of information on that because I can tell you how I feel. I have not really had any side effects of any kind. The nausea and all that stuff, haven't had any of it. Overall, I feel pretty zen. That's the best way to put it. I feel much more calm. Just overall, I feel more calm. I don't feel riled up about things. I don't get intense about things. Any negative thoughts I you still have them, but it's not as much as I did before. And I find they don't grip me the way they had been in the last 2 years. If I would get something in my head in the last 2 years, it just runs and runs and runs and runs and runs, and I can't turn it off. And now when it comes to my head, I'm like, it's not a big deal. What I used to say to my kids all the time is, when something bad happens, turn the page. Just move on. It's okay. But I was finding a very hard time doing that. And in the last, week or so, a little over a week since I've been on this, 2 weeks, I guess, since I've been on it, I feel like I have the ability to do that suddenly again, which is pretty cool. And I feel overall pretty positive. I feel much more like myself, which is an interesting experience to have to take an SSRI and to feel normal. And I understand a little better, I think, now when people are on it and they want to come off because they think, it doesn't change your personality. It doesn't make you a different person. It just makes you feel more comfortable and more like a better version of yourself. You feel more happy, you feel more upbeat, more positive, right? So the reason I want to make this video is to illustrate the fact that not everybody that has to take an antidepressant is depressed insofar as they're crying, sad, can't function, can't go to work, That wasn't me. I just felt wrong. I was quick to get annoyed, very quick to get annoyed. I was overly frustrated, and I just felt overly negative. So I just didn't feel right. And I wanted to, I think it's important to normalize mental health, and I wouldn't say that I still don't know if I was actually depressed necessarily, but I know it wasn't right. And I don't want to, the reason I didn't want to say I'm depressed is because I don't want to take away from people who have serious depression. I feel like mine was, if I'm going to say I had depression, it was very mild insofar as, I can still function. Lots of people that are depressed can't go to work because they just can't do it. I can go to work. I like to go to work still. I can still be up a lot of the time. Mine was not, crippling difficult. So I don't want to take away from anybody's experience who was, have had a more difficult experience than I've had. But I will say this, what I want to say to people is that if you feel off, if you feel like things aren't normal, if you think they're not right, if you feel like you're not your best version of yourself, you have to take a look at yourself and decide what that is. And if the people around you are saying, you're acting a little different, sometimes you have to say, okay, maybe they're telling me the truth, because we all argue that. You're like, no, I'm fine, I'm good, whatever. But in reality, lots of times, maybe you weren't where you want to be. Maybe you're not the person you want to be. Maybe you're feeling down. Maybe you're feeling off. It's okay. Go ask for help. I know people talk about this all the time. It's important to do it. I was never at a point where I was suicidal. I was never at a point when I was, crying. I was never at a point I couldn't go to work. But I didn't feel right. And I feel much more right now. In my mind, I feel much more positive. I feel like I did for my whole life now as compared to the last 2 years. And it's funny, it's only been a little over 2 weeks, but I feel very different inside. And that could be, some people might say, "Oh, that's a placebo." Maybe it is. I really don't care. I haven't had terrible side effects. I don't have any side effects really at all. I just feel pretty good. I feel pretty normal. I feel pretty calm. I said to my wife, I feel zen. Which, if you know me at all, is not really my thing. I'm not a Zen kind of guy. So it's kind of nice to feel a little bit more Zen and feel a little bit more calm and feel a little more like yourself. So if you're not feeling like yourself, I would encourage you to talk to somebody and see what the issue is, because you could be like me. And I think it's important for people to talk about it and understand it, and understand that just because somebody seems positive at work like I did, they could still be struggling a little bit on side. It's like that meme that says, you don't be kind to people because you don't know what they're going through. You really don't. I mean, I don't think that I was showing that, in the general population, but I wasn't my best version of myself either. And I'm glad that I'm much more like myself, and I feel better now. If you have comments, questions, things you want me to talk about, if you have a story that you'd like to share, I think it's important to share these stories. If you have a depression-based story that you'd like to share, write it up in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Hopefully you're all doing well. Have yourself an amazing day, everybody. Don't fight, be awesome.